Super Bowl 59 is just around the corner, but before that, 58 different Super Bowls have come and gone. But how good were they? In this video, I'm going to rank every single Super Bowl in NFL history from worst to best, from the first ever Super Bowl all the way back in 1967 to the most recent Super Bowl in 2024. If you enjoyed this video, then please drop a like and subscribe if you're new. Subscribing takes just a second and it really helps me out. Thank you, and let's get started. Number 58, Super Bowl 20. Chicago Bears beat New England Patriots 46-10. Coming in at dead last is Super Bowl 20, and looking at the score, it's pretty obvious why. This was a complete blowout by the Bears. They allowed just 123 total yards and forced 6 turnovers out of the Patriots. New England actually got the first score with a field goal in the first quarter, but it was all Chicago after that. They scored 44 unanswered points before the Pats finally got in the end zone, and the Bears ended it with a safety. Overall, a really bad Super Bowl. Number 57, Super Bowl 48. Seattle Seahawks beat Denver Broncos 43-8. Everybody remembers this Super Bowl, mainly for the hype that it had. Peyton Manning and the 2013 Broncos offense was the best offense in the Super Bowl era, and they were coming off a 10-point win over the New England Patriots in the conference championship game. The Seahawks entered the contest with the best defense in the league at the time, the Legion of Boom. Led by Cam Chancellor, Richard Sherman, and Bobby Wagner, this defense had suffocated teams all season, allowing more than 20 points just 3 times. Everybody expected this to be a close game, but that went out the window after the very first play. The ball was snapped over Manning's head for a safety, and everything went downhill from there for the Broncos. The Seahawks were up 36-0 before the Broncos managed to even score a point, and this went down as one of the most disappointing Super Bowls ever. Number 56, Super Bowl 24. San Francisco 49ers beat Denver Broncos 55-10. Another blowout here. This one actually has the largest point differential in any Super Bowl, being 45 points. It also features the most points scored by one team, and no, it's not the Denver Broncos. This one was never really close after the first quarter, but it did feature Joe Montana throwing 5 touchdowns. This Super Bowl did set some records, but it wasn't a good game. Number 55, Super Bowl 27. Dallas Cowboys beat Buffalo Bills 52-17. The Super Bowl marked the 3rd straight Bills loss in the big game, and as you can tell, they lost pretty badly. The Bills scored first, and then the Cowboys completely took over. They forced a still-standing Super Bowl record 9 turnovers, and overall didn't let the Bills offense do anything. Jim Kelly actually got hurt, and Panthers legend Frank Reich came in and was terrible. Troy Aikman threw 4 touchdowns, and Emmitt Smith ran for 108 yards. The defense scored 2 touchdowns, and that's how you accumulate the 2nd most points by one team in Super Bowl history. Good performance by the Cowboys, but this wasn't a good game overall. Number 54, Super Bowl 18. Los Angeles Raiders beat Washington Redskins 38-9. Another blowout. There are a lot more of these than I thought, for being the Super Bowl and all. This was a pretty prototypical blowout. The Raiders outgained the Redskins by over 100 yards, thanks in large part due to Marcus Allen rushing for a then record 191 yards and 2 touchdowns. Believe it or not, the Raiders are tied with the Chiefs for the most points by an AFC team in the Super Bowl, with 38. That's 17 points behind the 49ers, who have 55 and have the most points by one team in the Super Bowl. That fact was certainly more interesting than this game was. The Redskins never kept it close, Joe Theismann was bad, and it was just a lousy game overall. Number 53, Super Bowl 22. Washington Redskins beat Denver Broncos 42-10. Another Super Bowl where the Broncos got blown out. This is getting kind of depressing. This Super Bowl was interesting for one reason only, and that's the fact that the Redskins scored a Super Bowl record 35 points in one quarter, that being the second quarter. The Broncos actually jumped out to a 10-0 lead after the first quarter, but they didn't score again for the rest of the game, and the Redskins did the whole 35 points in the second quarter thing. 5th round rookie running back Timmy Smith ran for 204 yards, a Super Bowl record that is still standing today. Just like Super Bowl 24, Super Bowl 22 set some records, but the fact that it was a complete blowout kept it from being higher on the list. Number 52, Super Bowl 35. Baltimore Ravens beat New York Giants 34-7. This Super Bowl was the 7th largest Super Bowl margin of victory, and funnily enough, it ended up as the 7th worst Super Bowl on this list. Coincidence? Yes, it's pure coincidence. Anyway, this was not a good Super Bowl. The Giants committed 5 turnovers and didn't even score an offensive touchdown. Their lone score was on a kick return. This did allow Trent Dilfer to be a Super Bowl champion, which is really weird to say considering he sucks, but whatever. Yeah, this one wasn't very exciting, but at least it wasn't a 45-point differential. Number 51, Super Bowl 6. Dallas Cowboys beat Miami Dolphins 24-3. The first single-digit Super Bowl on the list may not have been a complete blowout, but that doesn't mean it was good. The 3 points by the Dolphins is the least amount scored in a Super Bowl by one team, tied with the Rams of course. This was one of the most uneventful Super Bowls ever. To be honest, the most memorable thing that happened was the fact that this was the last Super Bowl to be played with the hash mark set at 20 feet from the sidelines, as they were brought into 18.5 feet the following season. Yeah, that's really it for this one. Not a blowout, but not a good game. Number 50, Super Bowl 53. New England Patriots beat Los Angeles Rams 13-3. You knew this one was going to be toward the bottom of the list, and the only reason it was even this high was because it was a close game pretty much the whole time. But that doesn't mean that it was a good game. Entering the fourth quarter, the score was 3-3, but in that fourth quarter, the Patriots managed to score 10 points and win. This game holds the record for the fewest points scored in a Super Bowl and fewest points by a winning team in the Super Bowl. What's weird is that the Patriots actually managed to garner 407 yards of offense, but they were still only able to put up 13 points. Both teams combined to go 6 for 25 on third down, and there were 14 punts. It was a close game, but this Super Bowl sucked. Number 49, Super Bowl 9. Pittsburgh Steelers beat Minnesota Vikings 16-6. This one was kind of similar to Super Bowl 53. It even had the same point differential. This one does go a bit higher though because it had slightly more points, it had the first safety in Super Bowl history, and it's the first time that we got to see the steel curtain in the big game. They forced 5 turnovers out of Minnesota's offense, and Franco Harris carried the Steelers' offense. Literally. Still not a great game, but slightly better than Super Bowl 53. Number 48, Super Bowl 28. Dallas Cowboys beat Buffalo Bills 30-13. This was the second year in a row that the Cowboys beat the Bills in the Super Bowl, and the fourth year in a row that the Bills lost the Super Bowl. By halftime, the Bills were up 13-6 on the Cowboys, but then got outscored 24-0 in the second half. This game wasn't really that interesting overall, but it did mark the end of the Bills' 4-year Super Bowl loss streak, which gives it an odd in my eyes. But other than that, there really isn't anything to say about this one. Mediocre Super Bowl that ended a historic streak. Number 47, Super Bowl 55. Tampa Bay Buccaneers beat Kansas City Chiefs 31-9. I think some people may have this Super Bowl higher because of recency bias or the fact that Patrick Mahomes did some really cool sidearm throws, but remember that this game was really never that close, especially in the second half, and Mahomes wasn't exactly good in this game. Now, granted, the Chiefs' offensive line had a really bad day, which didn't help. The main reason why this is a 47 and not lower down is because of the fact that this was Brady's first year on the Bucs, and he won a ring, giving him 1 ring for every single Harry Potter book, or 1 ring for every day of the week, or 1 ring for yeah, you get the point. Anyway, okay, Super Bowl. Moving on. Number 46, Super Bowl 26. Washington Redskins beat Buffalo Bills 37-24. This was the second Super Bowl in the Bills' 4-year Super Bowl losing streak, and while it had points, that's really all it had. This game was never close. It was 37-10 entering the second half of the fourth quarter, and the only reason that the score is what it is was because of 2 garbage time touchdowns. It was effectively a blowout without actually being a blowout. The Raiders forced 5 turnovers, and outside of 1 interception, it didn't really make any mistakes. This game was certainly better than the previous ones on our list, but it's still not amazing. Number 45, Super Bowl 21. New York Giants beat Denver Broncos 39-20. Another Super Bowl that was really just points and that's it. It was close in the first half, but the Giants pulled away with a 30-point second half. There were as many offensive mistakes as Super Bowl 26, but those two were honestly interchangeable. This game did feature Phil Simms' outstanding performance, finishing 22 of 25 for 268 yards and 3 touchdowns with no interceptions. His 150.9 passer rating was and still is the highest in a Super Bowl by any quarterback. Again, not an amazing Super Bowl, but it wasn't horrible either. Number 44, Super Bowl 2. Green Bay Packers beat Oakland Raiders 33-14. Here we've got the second ever Super Bowl, and this game, while being a blowout, is this high on the list for its legacy. For one, it was basically the reason for the Lombardi Trophy being called the Lombardi Trophy, obviously named after Vince Lombardi, who coached the Packers to the first 2 Super Bowl victories. It also marked the first repeat in Super Bowl history, as both of the first 2 Super Bowls were won by the Packers. The game itself wasn't that good, but again, its legacy is what puts it here at number 44. Number 43, Super Bowl 8. Miami Dolphins beat Minnesota Vikings 24-7. This was the first and what would end up being 3 Super Bowl losses in 4 years for the Minnesota Vikings. This game was never close, as the Dolphins scored 24 points before the Vikings scored a garbage time touchdown late. Neither offense was particularly stunning in terms of yardage, and the Vikings were actually better on third down, but the inability to run the ball and the 2 turnovers ended up being the Vikings' downfall. Bob Greasy only attempted 7 passes, but that didn't matter as Larry Zonka carried the ball 33 times for 145 yards and 2 touchdowns. This game overall wasn't great, but due to the fact that it displayed competent offense and that it wasn't a complete blowout, it sits at number 43. Number 42, Super Bowl 15. Oakland Raiders beat Philadelphia Eagles 27-10. This was another mediocre Super Bowl that was close for a bit, but eventually the Raiders pulled away. They forced 4 turnovers while not committing any themselves. That was the main difference. Other than that, both offenses were actually very similar statistically, but one side had 4 turnovers and the other side didn't. Raiders linebacker Rod Martin picked off Eagles quarterback Ron Jaworski 3 times, which is still a Super Bowl record. But other than that, there really isn't anything else to talk about here. This was just another whatever Super Bowl. Number 41, Super Bowl 4. Kansas City Chiefs beat Minnesota Vikings 23-7. Yeah, another pretty meh bowl. The Vikings were actually favored by 13.5, but did not meet expectations, a trend that has continued to this day. The Chiefs quickly got out to a 16-0 lead, and that was that. The Vikings committed 5 turnovers, and their only 7 points came in the third quarter. This game did have the 65 toss power trap, which will forever be an iconic Super Bowl moment, but overall was a mediocre game. Number 40, Super Bowl 12. Dallas Cowboys beat Denver Broncos 27-10. This game was pretty one-sided the entire time. The Broncos managed to score 10 points in the fourth quarter, but that was it. They committed 8 turnovers, and it's hard to win football games when you commit 8 turnovers. Broncos quarterback Craig Morton boasted a 0.0 passer rating, which is the worst passer rating possible, but at least that gives this game something interesting about it, because nothing else really was. Super Bowl 12 is the definition of a below-average game. Number 39, Super Bowl 11. Oakland Raiders beat Minnesota Vikings 32-14. This Super Bowl marked the end of the Vikings' run of Super Bowl disappointment, as this was their 4th Super Bowl loss and they haven't been back since. Meaning now instead of disappointing in the Super Bowl, they just disappoint in general. This game was pretty mediocre, but we did see a then record 266 rushing yards by the Raiders. And this was also legendary coach and broadcaster John Madden's only Super Bowl victory. This game wasn't that good, but it had some nice moments and overall wasn't the worst thing we've ever seen. Number 38, Super Bowl 19. San Francisco 49ers beat Miami Dolphins 38-16. This was the second of 3 Super Bowls in the 1980s for the 49ers, and it featured 2 of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, Joe Montana and Dan Marino. This game did have a pretty good first half, with the score being 28-16 Niners, but after that, the Niners scored 10 points in the second half to the Dolphins' none. This was Marino's only Super Bowl, and he actually played decent considering the support around him was awful. The Dolphins only ran for 25 total yards all game. Montana threw for 331 yards and 3 touchdowns, and even added a rushing touchdown. This game wasn't super close, but it did have a good first half and wasn't a snooze fest, so that gives it the number 38 spot. Number 37, Super Bowl 40. Pittsburgh Steelers beat Seattle Seahawks 21-10. This Super Bowl gave Ben Roethlisberger the title of youngest quarterback to ever win a Super Bowl, being just 23 years and 340 days old. Interestingly, Big Ben didn't even play well. In fact, he is the lowest passer rating by a Super Bowl winning quarterback. This game did have some interesting plays, including a game-clinching 43-yard touchdown pass from Antoine Randall to fellow receiver Hines Ward. It wasn't super high scoring, but this game definitely had some memorable moments. Number 36, Super Bowl 37. Tampa Bay Buccaneers beat Oakland Raiders 48-21. This was the Gruden Bowl, as people like to call it, due to the fact that John Gruden, who had coached the Raiders from 1998 to 2001, was now the coach of the Bucs and playing his former team just 1 year after they traded him. And it's safe to say Gruden got the last laugh, as his Bucs dropped 48 on the Raiders in a 27-point victory. Raiders quarterback Rich Gannon threw a record-breaking 5 interceptions, and they were only able to muster 19 yards on the ground. The Bucs put up 365 yards, with Michael Pittman rushing for 124 yards. This Super Bowl wasn't a close game, but it did have points and did have a great storyline with the whole Gruden incident, so that bumps it up a few spots. Number 35, Super Bowl 29. San Francisco 49ers beat San Diego Chargers 49-26. This game actually has a record for the most points ever in a Super Bowl, but unfortunately that didn't translate into a close game. Points are exciting, but when one team is scoring significantly more than the other team, it just doesn't nearly have the same effect. This was still a pretty decent game though. Steve Young threw for 6 touchdowns, with Jerry Rice catching 3 of them. The 49ers finished with 455 yards, the Chargers 354, but what really killed the Chargers was the 3 turnovers. There were also no lead changes, and this game was 42-10 at one point. This game had points, but the fact that it was pretty much a blowout keeps it from being higher. Number 34, Super Bowl 1. Green Bay Packers beat Kansas City Chiefs 35-10. And here we have it, the first ever Super Bowl. Yeah, I know this game was a blowout, but it gets an advantage for being the one that started it all. And to be fair, this game did have a good first half, and statistically, both teams were actually pretty good. But the main difference was the Packers going an incredible 11 for 15 on third down. This game may not have been the best, but it began what would eventually come to be the biggest sporting event in America. Number 33, Super Bowl 41. Indianapolis Colts beat Chicago Bears 29-17. Peyton Manning's first Super Bowl. This game was actually mostly Chicago early on, but a 10-point second quarter and a 13-point second half by the Colts crushed the Bears' hopes. The Bears committed 5 turnovers and overall struggled to pass the ball. And while the Colts did commit 3 turnovers of their own, they managed to outgain the Bears by 165 yards. This game just came down to mistakes, and the Colts made less of them. This was a pretty decent game. It was close for a while and wasn't a snooze fest. Not much else to say. Number 32, Super Bowl 17. Washington Redskins beat Miami Dolphins 27-17. This was a pretty decent back and forth game, but the Redskins scored 14 points in the fourth quarter to seal the win. Redskins running back John Riggins set a still-standing Super Bowl record 38 carries, which he turned into 166 yards and a touchdown. Dolphins quarterback David Woodley only completed 4 passes all game off 14 attempts, and they really couldn't get anything going offensively. Decent game, but there's a lot better. Number 31, Super Bowl 30. Dallas Cowboys beat Pittsburgh Steelers 27-17. This was overall a pretty solid Super Bowl. Nothing amazing, but it certainly wasn't boring. The Cowboys dominated from the beginning, but a 10-point fourth quarter by the Steelers made things interesting. However, the Cowboys were able to put it away late with an Emmitt Smith touchdown. Larry Brown became the first cornerback to win Super Bowl MVP, recording 2 interceptions in the second half. The only other corner to have won Super Bowl MVP is Dexter Jackson in Super Bowl 37. The main storyline from this game was that whoever won would be tied for the 49ers for the most Super Bowl wins by a franchise, and the Cowboys won their 5th Super Bowl to get it done. Overall, fairly good game. Number 30, Denver Broncos beat Atlanta Falcons 34-19. This was John Elway's second consecutive Super Bowl, and at that time, he was the oldest quarterback to win a Super Bowl since Earl Morrall did back in Super Bowl 7. This game was never really close past the first quarter, but it did feature a 30-point fourth quarter, which was pretty cool. The Falcons gained 337 total yards, but committed 4 turnovers, and that was the main reason they lost. That and the fact that the Falcons defense allowed 457 yards to the Broncos. Broncos wide receiver Rod Smith had a big day, catching 5 passes for 152 yards, including an 80-yard touchdown. Overall, pretty good game with a fun fourth quarter, but the fact that it wasn't very close keeps it lower. Number 29, Super Bowl 31. Green Bay Packers beat New England Patriots 35-21. This was Brett Favre's one and only Super Bowl victory, and he shockingly didn't throw any interceptions. Drew Bledsoe could not say the same as he threw 4 of them. This was a pretty solid game, however, especially in the first quarter, where both teams combined for 24 points. But after that, it was mostly Green Bay. They scored 25 points in the final 3 quarters to the Patriots' 7. This game also featured a then Super Bowl record 99-yard kickoff return touchdown by Packers wide receiver Desmond Howard. With his 154 kickoff return yards and 90 punt return yards, Howard became the first and only special teams player to win Super Bowl MVP. I really like obscure things like this, and that's the main reason that this Super Bowl is above some of the others. Special teams plays, especially returners, almost always get zero recognition, so it's nice that Howard was able to have the performance that he did and get recognized for it. Not much else to say here, but this was a pretty good Super Bowl. Number 28, Super Bowl 36. New England Patriots beat St. Louis Rams 20-17. We've entered the top half, and the first Super Bowl here actually happens to be the first one-score game I've covered so far. In fact, only 23 out of the 58 Super Bowls have been decided by 1 score. That's shocking to me. Anyway, this was the Super Bowl that began the Tom Brady era and the Patriots dynasty. This game was originally all Patriots, as the score was 17-3 heading into the fourth quarter. However, Kurt Warner and the Rams began a ferocious comeback, scoring 14 unanswered points to tie the game, giving the ball back to the Patriots with 1 minute and 21 seconds to go, and the Pats had no timeouts. John Madden famously said,
"Run the clock out. You have to play for overtime now. I don't think you want to force anything here. You don't want to do anything stupid because you have no timeouts and you're backed up."
However, Tom Brady did the first of what would eventually be many game-winning drives in the Super Bowl, orchestrating a 9-play, 53-yard drive that led to a 48-yard game-winning field goal by Adam Vinatieri with no time left. This Super Bowl may not have been the most high-scoring, but it came down to the final seconds and birthed what would later become the greatest dynasty in NFL history. Number 27, Super Bowl 7. Miami Dolphins beat Washington Redskins 14-7. This Super Bowl wasn't the most entertaining, not even close, but it did do one thing. It capped off the only perfect season to ever occur. The 1972 Miami Dolphins finished the regular season 14-0 and won their 3 postseason games, including the Super Bowl, to finish 17-0. They also set and still hold the record for the longest period in the Super Bowl to not allow any points, as Washington didn't score until 2 minutes and 7 seconds left in the fourth quarter. This Super Bowl is mainly this high because of the fact that it gave the Dolphins the only perfect season ever, but hey, let's just appreciate greatness when we see it. Number 26, Super Bowl 14. Pittsburgh Steelers Steelers beat Los Angeles Rams 31-19. This was the final Super Bowl in the Steelers dynasty, as they became the first team to win 4 Super Bowls. This game was actually a really close back-and-forth battle up until the fourth quarter, where the Steelers scored 14 unanswered points to win. Franco Harris scored 2 touchdowns and the Steelers defense forced 3 turnovers. There really isn't anything else to say about this one. It was a good overall game. Number 25, Super Bowl 44. New Orleans Saints beat Indianapolis Colts 31-17. Just like Super Bowl 14, this was also a close battle up until the fourth quarter, where the Saints scored 15 unanswered points to win. The Saints actually never held a lead until 5:42 left in the fourth quarter, but everyone remembers this Super Bowl for the Saints' onside kick at the beginning of the second half. Things weren't looking good for the Saints, as they were down 10-6 and had to kick the ball back to the Colts. But Thomas Morstead had kicked an onside kick that the Saints recovered. It was and still is one of the ballsiest play calls in NFL history. That play sparked a 25-point second half by the Saints that was more than good enough to win their only Super Bowl. This did get a bit ugly at the end, but it was still a good game that featured one of the most memorable plays in Super Bowl history. Number 24, Super Bowl 5. Baltimore Colts beat Dallas Cowboys 16-13. Sure, it may be low scoring, but Super Bowl 5 might be the most underrated of all time. This game was mostly Dallas at the start, as they held a 13-6 lead heading into the fourth quarter. However, the Colts managed to score 10 points in 7.5 minutes, including a game-winning field goal by rookie kicker Jim O'Brien with 5 seconds left. That was the only time the Colts held the lead all game. This game also featured another anomaly, as Cowboys linebacker Chuck Howley won Super Bowl MVP, being the only player to ever win the award on the losing team. Howley recorded 2 interceptions and a fumble recovery, but it wasn't enough. This game might not have been the most exciting, but I still think it was a fun one that had some really cool moments. Number 23, Super Bowl 10. Pittsburgh Steelers beat Dallas Cowboys 21-17. This was another one of those slightly above average Super Bowls that had a few good moments, but wasn't the most exciting. This game did start off slow, as the fourth quarter began with a score of 10-7 Dallas, but that fourth quarter had 21 points, including 14 unanswered by the Steelers. The main difference in this one, like so many others, was the turnover. Dallas had 3, Pittsburgh had none. Lynn Swann had a great game, finishing with 4 catches for 161 yards and a touchdown, and he became the first wide receiver to win Super Bowl MVP. Again, this wasn't the best game, but it was certainly a good one. Number 22, Super Bowl 16. San Francisco 49ers beat Cincinnati Bengals 26-21. This game had quite a few interesting moments. For one, it was the first Super Bowl where the losing team outgained the winning team in terms of total yardage. It was also the first Super Bowl in the 49ers' legendary 80s run. This game was originally all 49ers, as they had a 20-0 lead going into the second half. But the Bengals began a comeback that came so close to happening, but fell just 5 points short. Both Dan Ross and professional Patrick Mahomes Glazer Chris Collinsworth finished with over 100 yards, but the Bengals couldn't overcome their 20-point deficit, nor their 4 turnovers. If it wasn't for the comeback attempt, this game would be a lot lower, but because that made it a bit more entertaining, especially toward the end, it stays at number 22. Number 21, Super Bowl 23. San Francisco 49ers beat Cincinnati Bengals 20-16. This was the second time that the 49ers beat the Bengals in the Super Bowl, and was their final one in the 80s, though they did win another in 1990. This was a really good back and forth game that stayed close the whole time. Entering the fourth quarter, the Bengals were up 13-6, but the 49ers scored 14 points in that quarter, including an 11-play, 92-yard game-winning touchdown drive. Jerry Rice finished with 215 yards, which is still the most receiving yards by a player in the Super Bowl. Overall, I have this game above the previous 49ers-Bengals Super Bowl because of the fact that it came down to the final drive, and it contains a still standing Super Bowl record. Both are good, but this one is better. Number 20, Super Bowl 39. New England Patriots beat Philadelphia Eagles 24-21. This was another classic back-and-forth Super Bowl. Both teams traded blows, but the Patriots jumped out to a 10-point lead with 8:40 remaining, and the Eagles couldn't quite catch up. This was the third Super Bowl in 4 years for the Patriots, but would end up being the last Super Bowl they would win until Super Bowl 49. Once again, the main difference was turnovers, as the Patriots only had 1 to the Eagles' 4. Both Deion Branch and Terrell Owens had big games for their respective teams, with Branch having 133 yards and Owens having 122 yards. Branch ended up winning Super Bowl MVP. Overall, this was a good, close Super Bowl, and you can't ask for too much more than that. Number 19, Super Bowl 50. Denver Broncos beat Carolina Panthers 24-10. I might get some flack for putting Super Bowl 50 this high because I know a lot of people didn't find it very entertaining, and to some extent I agree, but this game still had some really cool moments. For one, this was Peyton Manning's final ever game, and it was awesome to see him go out a champion. This was also the Von Miller game, as he had 3 sacks and 2 forced fumbles, one of which led to a touchdown, and the other leading to this infamous play where Cam Newton refused to jump for the ball. Miller ended up winning Super Bowl MVP. Sure, this wasn't the most entertaining game of all time, but the narratives that came out of it are enough to place it this high in my opinion. Number 18, Super Bowl 45. Green Bay Packers beat Pittsburgh Steelers 31-25. We've now made it to Aaron Rodgers' only Super Bowl victory, and this game was really good despite not having any lead changes. The Packers never trailed once, and at halftime it was 21-10. However, after a few back and forth shots, the Steelers scored a fourth quarter touchdown to bring the Packers' lead down to 3. But then Aaron Rodgers orchestrated a 10-play, 70-yard field goal drive that took 5 minutes and 27 seconds off the clock, and that sealed it, capping off an exciting 18-point fourth quarter. Rodgers was excellent in this game, throwing for 309 yards and 3 touchdowns, and Jordy Nelson was the go-to guy as he had 9 receptions for 140 yards and a touchdown. Big Ben played pretty well but threw 2 interceptions. This game had a lot of passing. In fact, this Super Bowl holds the record for the fewest rushing attempts by both teams. There not being any lead changes does drag it down a bit, but this was still a good Super Bowl overall. Number 17, Super Bowl 54. Kansas City Chiefs beat San Francisco 49ers 31-20. The Super Bowl that began the Chiefs dynasty. This game started out hot with a tied 10-10 score going into the second half. The 49ers then had a great third quarter, outscoring the Chiefs 10-0 to take a 20-10 lead. But then the Chiefs had the best fourth quarter in the history of the Super Bowl, scoring 21 unanswered points to win the game. The most famous play from this game is easily Jet Chip Wasp, where on 3rd and 15, Mahomes, despite being under heavy pressure and unable to set his feet, launched the ball 57.1 yards in the air to Tyreek Hill. That drive ended in a touchdown. Mahomes was named Super Bowl MVP, but running back Damian Williams had a phenomenal game himself, rushing for 104 yards while catching for 29 and scoring 2 total touchdowns, 1 on the ground and 1 through the air. I get that this wasn't a one-score game, but it was still a really good Super Bowl and produced some of the best moments we've seen. Number 16, Super Bowl 56. Los Angeles Rams beat Cincinnati Bengals 23-20. This wasn't a high-scoring game, but it was a classic back-and-forth battle between two teams that both deserved to win a Lombardi. The Rams held the lead for the entire first half, but the Bengals took over them on a one-play, 75-yard touchdown on the first play of the third quarter. They then scored again to take a 7-point lead, 20-13. But then, the Rams scored 10 unanswered points to take a 23-20 lead, with 1:25 left to play, which included a 15-play, 79-yard drive that ended in a Cooper Kupp absolutely burning Eli Apple for his second touchdown of the game. Joe Burrow, who had played extremely well despite being sacked 7 times up to that point, had a chance to drive down and win it, but on 4th and 1, Aaron Donald brought the pressure and forced an incomplete pass, sealing it for the Rams. This was Matthew Stafford's first year on the Rams, and he won them a Super Bowl. This game is one of the more underrated Super Bowls of all time, and I think it deserves to be this high on the list. Number 15, Super Bowl 3. New York Jets beat Baltimore Colts 16-7. This may not be the most exciting Super Bowl ever, but it had the single most memorable storyline a Super Bowl has ever and probably will ever have: Joe Namath's famous guarantee. Coming into this game, the Colts were favored by a whopping 18 points, and everyone was expecting another blowout, just like the last 2 Super Bowls. The AFL was just not on the same level as the NFL at the time. However, before the game, Namath said, "We're going to win Sunday. I guarantee it." And despite all the odds stacked against him and the Jets, Namath was right. The Jets leaped out to a 16-0 lead and didn't allow a single score until there was 3:19 left in the fourth quarter. This is regarded as one of the biggest upsets in Super Bowl history, right there with the Giants in Super Bowl 42. The legacy that this game left is still seen even today. This game proved that the AFL League could actually hang with and beat the NFL League. It can be argued that without this game, without this Jets victory, the NFL-AFL merger never even happens. Was it the most exciting game? Far from it, but it left a mark on the NFL that no Super Bowl ever has before. Number 14, Super Bowl 58. Kansas City Chiefs beat San Francisco 49ers 25-22. In case you were wondering where the most recent Super Bowl would stack up, here you go. This was the second year in a row that the Chiefs won the Super Bowl, and the second time that they beat the San Francisco 49ers in the big game. This game started out right for the 49ers, as they took a 10-0 lead with one of the more iconic plays in recent Super Bowl history, with a Juwan Jennings cross-field pass to Christian McCaffrey, who took it in for the score. At halftime, it was 10-3 Niners, but the Chiefs scored 10 unanswered points in the third quarter to take the lead. Both teams kept trading blows until, with 1:53 left, the 49ers scored a field goal to take a 13-point lead. However, Patrick Mahomes orchestrated an 11-play, 64-yard drive that ended with a Harrison Butker field goal to send it into overtime. This was just the second Super Bowl ever to go into overtime, the only other one being Super Bowl 51. It was here where the 49ers made one of the most questionable decisions in Super Bowl history. They elected to receive the ball first, despite the fact that by now, the overtime rules had changed to where both teams were guaranteed a possession. It was the logical choice to take the ball second, effectively giving you both an extra down and an exact look at what you needed to do. The 49ers ended up settling for a field goal on that drive, and Patrick Mahomes did what he does best, leading a 13-play, 75-yard touchdown drive to win it. This game wasn't the craziest and didn't have the most memorable moments, but it definitely had some, and was just a fun back-and-forth duel between two great teams. Number 13, Super Bowl 32. Denver Broncos beat Green Bay Packers 31-24. This was just a fun Super Bowl, especially for John Elway, who had lost 3 previous Super Bowls up to this point. He finally managed to win one, though it wasn't really his play that was the reason for the Broncos' victory. That honor goes to Terrell Davis, who carried the ball 30 times for 157 yards and 3 touchdowns. He's tied with Jalen Hurts for the most rushing touchdowns in the Super Bowl. This game was also just a good back and forth. The Packers scored a touchdown, then the Broncos scored 2 touchdowns and a field goal, but then the Packers scored a touchdown and a field goal to tie things up, then the Broncos scored a touchdown, then the Packers scored a touchdown, but finally, the Broncos led a 5-play, 49-yard drive that ended with a Terrell Davis game-winning touchdown. There were really no dull moments in this game. Neither side dominated. It was just a classic, fun Super Bowl. Number 12, Super Bowl 47. Baltimore Ravens beat San Francisco 49ers 34-31. This Super Bowl was a really interesting one. For starters, both coaches were actually brothers, Jim and John Harbaugh. Second, this was the Blackout Bowl. During the third quarter, there was a partial power outage that lasted for 34 minutes. At this point, it was looking like a blowout as the Ravens were ahead 28-6. But after the blackout, something changed. The 49ers found new life and fired off 17 unanswered points in just the third quarter. They added 8 more points in the fourth, but it wasn't quite enough. The Ravens scored 2 field goals that ended up being enough to win by 3. There were some excellent special teams plays as both teams combined for a Super Bowl record 312 kickoff return yards, including a 108th kickoff return touchdown by Jacoby Jones. This game, while being one-sided for the most part and not featuring any lead changes, was still really good, and the Harbaugh matchup and blackout pushed it up to number 12. Number 11, Super Bowl 46. New York Giants beat New England Patriots 21-17. This was the second time that the Giants and Eli Manning beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl, and while it wasn't quite as big of an upset as the first matchup these two teams had, it certainly wasn't surprising to see the Giants win. They set the record for the lowest winning percentage by a Super Bowl champion, finishing the regular season that year with just a 9-7 record. The actual game itself was pretty good. The Giants struck first with a 9-point first quarter, but then the Patriots followed that up with 17 unanswered points. The Giants then cut down the Pats' lead to 2 with 2 field goals, and in the fourth quarter, after getting the ball back due to a devastating Wes Welker drop with just under 4 minutes, Eli Manning made one of the best throws in NFL history to Mario Manningham, and that drive turned into a 9-play, 88-yard touchdown drive to win the game. This game had a great blend of offense and defense, wasn't upset, it featured a great game-winning drive with an insane throw. This game really had everything you could ask for in the Super Bowl, though it was the highest scoring we've seen. Overall, great game. Number 10, Super Bowl 25. New York Giants beat Buffalo Bills 20-19. We finally made it to my top 10 Super Bowls, and we're starting with the closest Super Bowl in NFL history. This game was dead even between both teams, neither one outplaying the other. There were multiple back and forth scores, lead changes, everything. And it came down to the final play. The Bills were driving, down by 1, and picked up a first down with an 11-yard run by Thurman Thomas. They spiked the ball with 8 seconds left in the game. Scott Norwood came out to attempt a 47-yard game-winning field goal when this happened. Wide right. The 2 words Bills fans fear the most. The 2 words that haunted the Bills then and continue to haunt them now. This was the Bills' best chance to win a Super Bowl, and they couldn't do it. This play sparked a 4-year stretch where the Bills lost 4 Super Bowls in a row. It's arguably the most memorable Super Bowl losing play. This game was really exciting, but Bills Mafia will hate it forever. Number 9, Super Bowl 38. New England Patriots beat Carolina Panthers 32-29. This Super Bowl gets to be this high because of its absolutely insane 37-point fourth quarter, the highest scoring fourth quarter ever in a Super Bowl. Funnily enough, both the first and third quarter were completely scoreless, though the second quarter had 24 points. I guess both teams decided to only score during even quarters. Anyway, the score was 14-10 Pats heading into the fourth, and they scored a touchdown to increase their lead to 11. However, the Panthers then scored 12 unanswered points to take a 1-point lead. The Patriots scored a touchdown and a 2-point conversion to take a 7-point lead, and then the Panthers tied it up with a touchdown with just over 1 minute to play. However, Tom Brady did it again, leading a 6-play, 37-yard drive that ended in a 41-yard game-winning field goal. Patriots wide receiver Deion Branch went off for 10 receptions, 143 yards, and a touchdown. Linebacker Mike Vrabel even caught a touchdown. This game finished with what was then the second most total yards in the Super Bowl, with 868 yards combined between the two teams. It was a really exciting Super Bowl, and it had one of, if not the best fourth quarters we've ever seen. Number 8, Super Bowl 43. Pittsburgh Steelers beat Arizona Cardinals 27-23. This was another really good Super Bowl with an awesome fourth quarter and a ton of cool plays. The Steelers had a 20-7 lead heading into the fourth quarter, aided by a Super Bowl record 100-yard interception return by James Harrison. However, Arizona proceeded to score 16 unanswered points to take a 23-20 lead, including a 64-yard touchdown by Larry Fitzgerald, which was his second of the game. However, the Steelers had an 8-play, 78-yard drive that was capped off by one of the best toe taps in NFL history. Santonio Holmes went up and caught the ball over 3 Cardinals defenders and somehow managed to keep both feet down for the game winner. The throw by Big Ben was also picture perfect, and this was one of the best plays we've ever seen in a Super Bowl. This game was pure thrill, especially in the fourth quarter, and I believe it's one of the most underrated Super Bowls ever. Number 7, Super Bowl 42. New York Giants beat New England Patriots 17-14. Here it is, the biggest Super Bowl upset since Super Bowl III. The New England Patriots were entering the game with a perfect 18-0 record up to this point. They finished the regular season 16-0 and won into both the divisional and conference championship game to get here. This was by all accounts the best team in NFL history. They had the best offense in the NFL and the 4th best defense in the NFL. They had a 315-point differential, the largest in NFL history, even today. Tom Brady had completed the best season of his career as he threw for 4,806 yards and 50 touchdowns to just 8 interceptions. Randy Moss finished the best season of his career with 1,500 yards and 23 touchdowns. This was, by definition, a super team. And on the other side were the Giants, who had a mere 10-6 record and were the 5 seed. The Patriots were favored by 12 points. Everybody expected the Patriots to win, but that wasn't what happened. Entering the fourth quarter, the score was a mere 7-3 Patriots lead, and then the Giants scored a touchdown. But then the Patriots scored a touchdown with just 2:42 left to go. There was no way the Giants could pull this off, right? But then, on 3rd and 5, with 1:15 left to go, Eli Manning dropped back, escaped pressure, and launched a desperation heave to David Tyree, who had caught just 5 passes all season long. Tyree went up and by some miracle, caught the ball and brought it down pinned to his helmet. 6 plays later, the Giants scored the game-winning touchdown. The helmet catch is arguably the greatest play in Super Bowl history, and it helped the Giants pull off the greatest upset in Super Bowl history. That alone makes it deserving of the number 7 spot. Number 6, Super Bowl 34. St. Louis Rams beat Tennessee Titans 23-16. This was another classic Super Bowl that came down to the wire, and then another all-time great play at the end. Things were not looking good for Tennessee as they were down 16-0 midway through the third quarter. However, they rallied off 16 unanswered points to tie the game with 2:12 left to play. The Rams then scored on a 1-play, 73-yard touchdown from Kurt Warner and Isaac Bruce. The Titans began their drive and it was looking like they were going to score and tie things up. With 6 seconds remaining, Titans quarterback Steve McNair threw short of the goal line to an open Kevin Dyson, and it looked like he was going to walk into the end zone. But at the last second, linebacker Mike Jones wrapped up Dyson and pulled him down. Dyson stretched as far as he could, but his knee came down too early. Dyson was 1 yard short. There is no doubt that this is the greatest tackle in NFL history, and it's arguably the closest Super Bowl ever. Sure, it wasn't the closest points-wise, but the Titans were just 1 yard short of potentially winning it all. This also kept off one of the greatest stories in NFL history, as this was the season where former undrafted free agent Kurt Warner started in place of an injured Trent Green, and he took the Rams to their franchise's first ever Super Bowl victory. The sheer excitement from the most down-to-the-wire Super Bowl ever, along with Kurt Warner's story, automatically is enough to place this game at 6. Number 5, Super Bowl 13. Pittsburgh Steelers beat Dallas Cowboys 35-31. We've made it to the top 5, the elite, the best of the best. And we're starting with by far the oldest Super Bowl on this list in a while. This game had everything. Lead changes, constant scoring, a 28-point fourth quarter. There was never a dull moment. The game was 21-17 Pittsburgh entering the fourth quarter, and the Steelers scored 14 unanswered points to take a commanding lead. However, the Cowboys began a ferocious comeback attempt, scoring 14 points of their own, but they fell short by 4 points. Terry Bradshaw threw for 4 touchdowns, and the Steelers had 2 100-yard receivers, Lynn Swann and John Stallworth. Cowboys running back Tony Dorsett led the Cowboys in both rushing and receiving yards. Both teams were pretty even, both in total yardage, third down percentage, turnovers, first downs, everything. But the Steelers were just a little bit better. Great Super Bowl by 2 excellent teams. Number 4, Super Bowl 57. Kansas City Chiefs beat Philadelphia Eagles 38-35. The Super Bowl that began the Chiefs' quest to three-peat. This was a classic shootout. Jalen Hurts scored a touchdown, then Kelsey did, then A.J. Brown did, then Nick Bolton did off of Jalen Hurts' fumble, then Hurts scored another touchdown, and then the Eagles added a field goal. It was looking good for the Birds going into halftime as they were up 24-14. And entering the fourth quarter, the Eagles were still up 27-21. However, Mahomes and the Chiefs proceeded to score 14 unanswered points to take a 35-27 lead. Their second touchdown in that stretch coming after a 65-yard punt return by Kadarius Toney, the longest in Super Bowl history. But then, Jalen Hurts scored his fourth touchdown of the game to tie things up at 35-all. And then, Patrick Mahomes did it again. He led the Chiefs on a 12-play, 66-yard drive that ended in a 27-yard game-winning field goal. Now, there was some ref help, but it wasn't really that bad of a call, just a soft one. This game really showcased Andy Reid's brilliance as he was able to exploit the Eagles' undisciplined defense not once, but twice on a play known as corn dog. Jalen Hurts had a great game with nearly 400 scrimmage yards and 4 total touchdowns, but it wasn't quite enough. This was truly one of the best Super Bowls ever, and hopefully this upcoming Super Bowl between these two is just as good. Number 3, Super Bowl 49. New England Patriots beat Seattle Seahawks 28-24. Entering the top 3, we've got Super Bowl 49. And I know every single one of you immediately went to the final play, and we'll get there. But this game was more than just the final play. After a scoreless first quarter, we saw a 28-point fourth quarter, 14 from each side. Then, the Seahawks scored 10 unanswered in the third quarter to take a 24-14 lead. The Patriots then scored 2 touchdowns, taking a 28-24 lead with 2:02 left to go. The Seahawks began their drive and it was going smoothly, when all of a sudden, Russell Wilson threw up a moon ball to Jermaine Kearse, who made an incredible catch. This play is so forgotten because of what happened right after, but this legitimately was one of the best catches in Super Bowl history. Marshawn Lynch then took the ball down to the 1-yard line and everybody on the field, everybody in the stadium, everybody on the planet knew that the Seahawks were going to hand the ball to Beast Mode to win the game. Instead, Wilson threw a slant route intended for Ricardo Lockett that was jumped and intercepted by Malcolm Butler. Ball game. It was and still is one of the most mind-boggling decisions ever made in an NFL game. This Super Bowl was absolutely insane and will likely be remembered as long as the sport is around. Number 2, Super Bowl 51. New England Patriots beat Atlanta Falcons 34-28. The greatest comeback in the history of the NFL. In fact, it might be the greatest comeback of any sport. Everybody knows how this game went. The Falcons took a 28-3 lead after a 21-point second quarter. Things were looking horrible for the Patriots. A 25-point deficit seemed nearly impossible to overcome. But then it began. James White touchdown, 19-point deficit. 33-yard field goal, 16-point deficit. Danny Amendola touchdown, 8-point deficit. Another James White touchdown after one of the greatest Super Bowl catches ever by Julian Edelman, 2-point deficit. Danny Amendola's 2-point conversion, tie game, overtime. And then the Patriots won the toss. Everybody knew what was coming next. The Patriots drove down the field and scored on a James White touchdown. Game over, history made. Tom Brady attempted 62 passes in this game and completed 43 of them for 466 yards. James White scored 2 touchdowns on the ground and an additional 1 through the air to go along with 139 scrimmage yards. This game was absolutely insane, and there's no question that it's one of the best Super Bowls ever. But for me, there's one Super Bowl that's better. Number 1, Super Bowl 52. Philadelphia Eagles beat New England Patriots 41-33. This is the greatest Super Bowl of all time. It blended a high-scoring, close game with some incredible storylines and had some insane plays. Backup quarterback Nick Foles took the starting job after Carson Wentz went down with a season-ending ACL and LCL tear in Week 14. Foles took the reins and became just the 9th backup quarterback to win the Super Bowl. The actual game was ridiculously crazy. Philadelphia had the lead for most of the game, but the Patriots were never far behind. With 9:22 left in the fourth quarter, Tom Brady threw a 4-yard touchdown to Rob Gronkowski for the Patriots' first lead of the day, 33-32. However, the Eagles went on to score 9 unanswered points to win the game 41-33, the second highest scoring Super Bowl ever. This game introduced arguably the greatest trick play ever, the Philly Special, where Nick Foles pretended to make adjustments, then leaked out on a flat route right where he caught Trey Burton's pass. This touchdown came at the very end of the first half, which was pivotal to the Eagles' win. Despite the loss, Tom Brady threw for a Super Bowl record 505 passing yards, and the Patriots had 3 100-yard receivers. Nick Foles, to become a Super Bowl MVP, threw for 373 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick, and of course, caught a touchdown. This game also had the most combined yards in Super Bowl history with 1,151 between both teams. Other than the one turnover by each team, there was no defense played. This was the first and only Super Bowl victory for the Philadelphia Eagles, and in my opinion, Super Bowl 52 was the greatest Super Bowl to ever be played. But that's it. That is every Super Bowl in NFL history ranked. Where do you agree? Where do you disagree? Who's going to win Super Bowl 59? Comment below. If you enjoyed this video, then please drop a like and subscribe if you're new. And that's it from me. See ya and enjoy Super Bowl 59.